Billionaire finds a baby left at his door with a note. She's yours from the night you don't remember. Lucas Grant woke to the familiar California sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Malibu mansion. The view was breathtaking, an endless expanse of turquoise Pacific, framed by perfectly manicured gardens. He was by any measure on top of the world. As Luke Grant, his stage name, he was a multi-platinum recording artist, an entertainer whose concerts sold out stadiums, whose face adorned magazine covers, and whose soulful voice was recognized globally. His home, a minimalist masterpiece of glass, steel, and white stone, reflected his success: sleek, modern, expensive, and, more often than not, profoundly empty. At 38, Lucas had achieved fame and fortune beyond his wildest dreams. He had a dedicated team managing his career, loyal fans worldwide, and access to every luxury imaginable. Yet the silence in the mansion often felt deafening. Relationships tended to buckle under the weight of his fame, the relentless touring, the constant scrutiny. He had friends, yes, colleagues, acquaintances, and an endless stream of people who wanted something from him, but true, deep connection felt elusive. Sometimes, the party circuit, the endless stream of events and after-parties, felt like the only way to fill the void, a temporary balm against a persistent loneliness he rarely admitted, even to himself. He swung his legs out of bed, the cool marble floor sending a slight shiver up his spine. He ran a hand through his perpetually tousled dark hair, catching his reflection in the mirrored closet doors. The face staring back was familiar from countless promotional photos, handsome, perhaps a little tired around the eyes. He had a recording session later today, followed by a charity gala tonight. Just another day in the whirlwind. He stretched, heading towards the in-soot bathroom, anticipating the routine shower, coffee brought by his housekeeper, Clara, a review of the day's schedule with his manager. Predictable, controlled, safe. He had no idea his carefully managed world was about to be irrevocably shattered. Lucas was halfway through his first cup of coffee, gazing out at the ocean, when he heard it. A faint sound, almost lost beneath the rhythmic crash of the waves. He paused, tilting his head. It sounded like crying? A cat, perhaps? A seagull? No, it was more human, high-pitched and insistent. He frowned, setting his mug down. Clara, his quiet and efficient housekeeper, was off-site running errands this morning. His security team monitored the perimeter, but the sound seemed closer, somehow inside the gates. Curiosity piqued, mingled with a faint unease. Lucas padded barefoot through the cavernous living room towards the massive glass front doors. As he got closer, the sound became clearer, unmistakable now. It was a baby crying. A real, live baby. His heart began to pound. This had to be some kind of prank. A bizarre fan stunt? He reached the towering front doors and peered through the reinforced glass. There, nestled on the cool stone of his expansive porch, just outside the range of the motion-activated sprinklers, was a large wicker basket. And inside it, partially wrapped in a soft-looking blanket, was the source of the crying, a tiny infant, face red and scrunched in distress. Lucas stared, dumbfounded. A baby, left on his doorstep. He fumbled with the security keypad, his fingers suddenly clumsy, and pushed the heavy door open. The baby's cries intensified as the sound hit the open air, small fists flailing. He knelt beside the basket, his mind racing. Who would do this? Why? Then he saw it tucked beside the infant, a plain white envelope. His name, Lucas Grant, was written on the front in neat, slightly shaky handwriting. His breath caught. With trembling fingers, he picked up the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the same neat but emotional script. Lucas, I'm so sorry. She's your baby from that night in Vegas, about 9 months ago. The big party at the Mirage. She's beautiful and healthy. But I can't keep her. I can't give her the life she deserves. You can. Please take care of her. She's innocent in all this. Don't try to find me. The note wasn't signed. Lucas read it again, then a third time, the words blurring. Vegas? 9 months ago? The Mirage? His mind flashed back a chaotic blur of post-concert celebration. Too much champagne, flashing lights, loud music, unfamiliar faces. He'd woken up the next day with a pounding headache and hazy, fragmented memories. It wasn't his usual style. Things had gotten out of hand, egged on by his entourage after a particularly successful run of shows. He'd regretted the excess, the lack of control, but he'd chalked it up to a rare lapse and tried to forget it. Until now, he looked down at the crying baby, her tiny face contorted with distress. His baby? His daughter? The thought was staggering, impossible. He felt a wave of dizziness, nausea rising in his throat. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake, a cruel, elaborate hoax. But the raw sincerity of the note, the vulnerability of the infant left helpless on his doorstep, a cold dread began to seep into his veins. What if it wasn't a hoax? What if that one night of recklessness had led to this? The baby's cries pierced through Lucas's shock. Instinct, raw and unfamiliar, kicked in. He couldn't just leave her here. Carefully, awkwardly, he lifted the infant out of the basket. She was surprisingly light, fragile, yet felt solid in his arms. Her crying softened slightly as she was held, her tiny head nuzzling instinctively towards his chest. The unexpected contact sent a strange jolt through him, a mixture of terror and something else, something warm and protective he couldn't immediately name. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. The vast, minimalist living room suddenly felt absurdly inappropriate for harboring a newborn. He looked around frantically. What did babies need? Milk? Diapers? He had absolutely no idea. Panic surged. He needed help. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over his manager's number, then hesitated. Alex was brilliant at managing his career, but a secret baby? This required a different kind of expertise and absolute discretion. He scrolled further and dialed David Chun, his longtime lawyer and confidant, the man who handled the delicate, often messy, aspects of his high-profile life. David, it's Lucas. I have a situation here. A serious one. His voice was unsteady. He quickly explained what had happened. The baby, the basket, the note. David, unflappable as ever, listened patiently. Okay, Lucas. First, stay calm, David advised, his voice a steady anchor. Is the baby okay? Does she seem harmed? No, she seems fine. Just crying. Small. Lucas stammered, looking down at the infant now, hiccuping softly against his shoulder. Right. Don't call the police yet. Don't call anyone else. I'll arrange for a discreet pediatrician to come to the house immediately to check her over. And I'm sending someone to pick up necessary supplies, formula, diapers, the works. Just keep her warm and try to soothe her. I'm on my way. Hanging up, Lucas felt a sliver of relief, but the underlying panic remained. He gently bounced the baby, mimicking motions he'd seen others do. Her cries subsided into soft whimpers. He sank onto one of his expensive white sofas, holding the tiny bundle carefully, feeling utterly out of his depth. As he sat there, waiting, his mind unwillingly drifted back to Vegas. 9 months ago, the end of his residency run at the Mirage. The final show had been electric. Afterwards, there was a massive party in one of the hotel's penthouse suites. His band, his crew, record label executives, celebrities, Hangers-on, it was a blur. Champagne flowed like water. He remembered laughing, loud music pounding, feeling invincible after the successful shows. He remembered talking to people, countless people. Faces swam in and out of focus. A woman with dark hair laughing at one of his jokes. Another with bright eyes near the bar. Had he danced with someone? Taken someone back to his own suite? The memories were frustratingly fragmented, shrouded in an alcoholic haze. He wasn't a blackout drinker, not usually, but that night had been different. He let loose, dropped his guard, indulged to excess. He'd woken up alone, head throbbing, with only vague impressions of the night before. He'd felt a pang of regret then for the lack of control, but he'd never imagined this. A tiny hand curled around his finger, startling him. He looked down at the baby. Her eyes, a deep, indeterminate blue, blinked open, regarding him with unnerving solemnity for a moment before drifting shut again. His daughter? The thought sent another wave of dizziness through him. Guilt washed over him, guilt for the reckless night, guilt for not remembering, guilt for the fear and confusion this tiny, innocent creature represented. He had to know the truth. David Chun arrived within the hour, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Lucas's frayed nerves. Shortly after, a discreet pediatrician and a woman carrying several large bags filled with baby supplies followed. While the doctor gently examined the infant in one of the guest bedrooms, pronouncing her healthy, likely only a day or two old, and slightly dehydrated, but otherwise fine, David and Lucas conferred in the living room. The note mentioned Vegas, the Mirage, 9 months ago, David said, reviewing the situation methodically. That gives us a time frame and location. But first things first, Lucas. We need certainty. You mean a DNA test, David stated plainly. It's the only way to know for sure before we take any further steps. We can do it discreetly. We have the baby's sample, obviously. We just need yours. Lucas nodded numbly. A part of him desperately wanted the test to come back negative, to prove this was all a bizarre mistake. Another part, strangely, already felt a connection to the tiny life sleeping in the other room, a terrifying sense of responsibility settling over him. The pediatrician collected a painless cheek swab from the baby before leaving, assuring Lucas she was healthy and providing basic care instructions. Another sample was collected from Lucas. David arranged for expedited, confidential testing through a specialized lab he trusted implicitly. The next 48 hours were agonizing. Lucas canceled his recording session and the gala, claiming a sudden illness. He stayed inside the mansion, the vast space feeling smaller, charged with nervous energy. He learned, through trial and error and frantic Googling, the basics of caring for the baby, mixing formula, changing diapers clumsily at first, rocking her when she cried. He discovered the surprisingly soothing effect of humming softly to her, fragments of melodies he was working on. He found himself simply watching her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him: fear, guilt, resentment, and a growing, undeniable tenderness. He barely slept, his mind racing. Who was the mother? Why leave her child like this? What kind of life had she endured for the past 9 months? And if the baby was his, what did that mean for his life, his career, his future? The call from David came late in the afternoon 2 days later. Lucas's hand was shaking as he answered. Lucas! David's voice was calm, professional, but carried an undercurrent Lucas couldn't quite decipher. The results are in. Lucas held his breath. And it's a match, Lucas. 99.999% probability. There's no doubt. She's your daughter. The words hit Lucas with the force of a physical blow. He sank onto the sofa, the phone slipping slightly in his grip. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a hoax. It was real. He had a daughter. The tiny infant sleeping peacefully in the bassinet David had procured was his flesh and blood. The reality was terrifying, overwhelming, and somehow devastatingly profound. Tears welled in his eyes, tears of shock, regret, and a dawning, terrifying sense of responsibility he couldn't escape. He was a father. The confirmation changed everything. The abstract possibility became concrete reality. Lucas now had a daughter, a tiny human being completely dependent on him, the result of a night he barely remembered. The weight of it settled heavily on his shoulders. "Okay," Lucas said to David, his voice shaky but resolute after absorbing the initial shock. "Okay, we need to find her, the mother." "Agreed," David replied. "She abandoned the child, Lucas. There are legal implications." I know," Lucas interrupted, pacing the room. "But the note. I can't keep her. I can't give her the life she deserves. She sounds desperate, not malicious. And she's the mother of my child. I need to understand. I need to find her." His motivations were complex. There was anger. Yes, how could someone abandon their child, his child? But there was also a growing sense of guilt, knowing his actions, however unintentional or forgotten, had contributed to this situation. And there was curiosity, a need to know the woman who had carried his daughter, to understand her story. Underlying it all was a burgeoning protective instinct, not just for the baby, but, strangely, for the unknown mother as well. What had driven her to such desperation? David, ever practical, had already anticipated this. "I've retained Frank Miller," he said, "best private investigator on the West Coast. Discreet, thorough, ethical. I briefed him hypothetically yesterday. With the DNA confirmation, he can start digging. Tell him to be careful," Lucas urged. "I don't want this turning into a media circus. And I don't want her harassed. I just need to find her." Frank Miller began his work immediately. The starting points were slim. Las Vegas, the Mirage Hotel, the specific party 9 months ago. Lucas racked his brain, trying to dredge up any detail. He remembered his usual suite number, the name of the event promoter who threw the party. He vaguely recalled someone spilling a drink on his jacket, a brief conversation about music near the terrace, a sea of faces under the strobe lights. None of it involved a clear memory of a specific woman. Miller cross-referenced guest lists, employee rosters for the hotel, and catering companies working the event, and security logs where possible. He discreetly interviewed members of Lucas's band and crew who had been there, probing their hazy recollections. It was painstaking work, chasing shadows from a night deliberately designed for excess and forgotten moments. Weeks passed. Lucas adjusted to the rhythm of life with a baby, whom he'd started calling Lily, a name that seemed to suit her delicate features. He hired a highly recommended, discreet nanny to help, but found himself increasingly involved in Lily's care, feeding her, changing her, rocking her to sleep. Holding her felt grounding, real, in a way his fame rarely did. The connection grew stronger each day, solidifying his resolve to find her mother. Finally, Frank Miller called David with a breakthrough. He'd identified a young woman named Mia Jensen who had been working as temporary catering staff at the Mirage party. Her employment ended shortly after. She had no fixed address for a while, then surfaced in a low-income neighborhood in Pasadena, having recently lost another job. She fit the time frame. Miller had obtained a discarded coffee cup she'd used, and a discreet comparison of trace DNA confirmed she was overwhelmingly likely the mother. "She's living in a pretty rough apartment complex," David relayed to Lucas. "Barely making ends meet, according to Miller's surveillance. Seems she's been struggling for months. Lucas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Mia Jensen. He tried the name, searched his fragmented memories. Nothing clicked. Yet this struggling young woman was Lily's mother. He had to see her. Lucas insisted on going himself, brushing aside David's and Frank Miller's suggestions of sending an intermediary. "No," he said firmly. "This is my responsibility. I need to talk to her face to face." He chose a nondescript rental car, dressed down in jeans, a baseball cap, and sunglasses, hoping to avoid recognition. Frank Miller had provided the address, a rundown, two-story apartment building in a neglected part of Pasadena, miles away in every sense from Lucas's Malibu enclave. The contrast was jarring. Graffiti marked the walls, stray cats roamed the cracked pavement, and the air hung heavy with the smells of exhaust fumes and desperation. Lucas felt a deep sense of unease and a sharper pang of guilt. Was this the environment Lily might have grown up in? Was this the life Mia had been living while carrying his child? He found the apartment number 2 be up a flight of rickety external stairs. The door was paint-chipped and bare. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and knocked. After a moment, the door opened a crack, secured by a tarnished chain. A pair of wary, tired eyes peered out. "Yes." The voice was hesitant, weak. "Mia Jensen?" Lucas asked, his own voice surprisingly unsteady. The eyes widened slightly in confusion, perhaps a flicker of fear. "Who's asking?" "My name is Lucas Grant." He pulled off the sunglasses and cap, revealing his face. He saw shock register in her eyes, followed immediately by panic. She tried to slam the door shut, but Lucas instinctively put his hand out, stopping it. "Mia, please," he said quickly, keeping his voice low and calm, though his heart was pounding. "I'm not here to cause trouble. We need to talk. About the baby." Her face crumpled, tears instantly welling. The fight seemed to drain out of her. She slowly unfastened the chain and opened the door, stepping back wordlessly to let him in. The apartment was tiny, sparsely furnished, and meticulously clean, despite the obvious poverty. A threadbare sofa, a small table with 2 chairs, a kitchenette barely large enough to turn around in. There was a profound sense of emptiness, of struggle. Mia stood by the window, her back to him, wrapping her arms around herself. She was thin, almost frail, her cheap clothes hanging loosely on her frame. She looked exhausted, her shoulders slumped. She was clearly still recovering physically and emotionally from the birth and the agonizing decision she had made. Lucas stood awkwardly in the small space, the silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken questions, accusations, and grief. How did you find me?" Mia finally whispered, her voice trembling, still facing the window. "I hired someone," Lucas admitted quietly. "After the DNA test confirmed Lily is my daughter." He used the name he'd chosen, watching for her reaction. Mia flinched slightly at the name, but didn't turn around. "Lily," she repeated softly, a world of longing in the single word. "Why, Mia?" Lucas asked, the question raw with confusion and hurt. "Why leave her like that? On a doorstep?" Mia finally turned, her face streaked with fresh tears, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame, defiance, and utter despair. "What else was I supposed to do?" she cried, her voice cracking. "Tell me. Show up and say, 'Hi, famous rock star Lucas Grant. Remember that drunken night you don't? Well, here's your baby.' You think anyone would have believed me? You think he would have believed me?" Lucas didn't answer. Would he have? Without a DNA test? Honestly, probably not. "I saw you that night," Mia continued, her voice dropping, becoming almost wistful. "At the party. I was working, serving drinks. I'd always loved your music. You You actually talked to me for a minute by the terrace. About the stars. You probably don't remember. Lucas frowned, searching his memory. A conversation about stars? It sounded vaguely, impossibly familiar, a tiny spark in the foggy recollection. It meant nothing to you, Mia said, bitterness creeping into her tone. Just another party, another face. Later, things got hazy for everyone. We ended up. She trailed off, unable to say the words, shame coloring her cheeks. It was a mistake. A stupid, drunken mistake. But it happened. I didn't know I was pregnant for weeks, she went on, pacing the tiny room. By the time I did, I'd already lost that catering job. My landlord raised the rent. I had no family to help. My mom passed years ago, my dad. Well, he wasn't interested. I tried to find work, but morning sickness, then showing. It got harder and harder. Why didn't you contact me? Lucas asked, his voice tight with a mixture of guilt and frustration. I could have helped. Mia laughed, a short, harsh sound devoid of humor. Helped? Lucas, look at you. Look at your life. Paparazzi follow you everywhere. Every move you make is news. What would people say? What would it do to your career? Rockstar's secret love child with penniless waitress. I couldn't do that to you. Or to her. She stopped pacing, looking directly at him, her eyes blazing with desperate conviction. And what kind of life could I give her? This. She gestured around the bare apartment. Struggling for rent, worrying about food? She deserved better. She deserved the life you could give her. Stability, security, everything I couldn't provide. So, leaving her on your doorstep. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, she sobbed, sinking onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. But I truly thought it was the best thing for her. And maybe, selfishly, for you too. A clean break. Lucas listened, standing frozen in the middle of the small room, as Mia's story unfolded. Each word, each tear, chipped away at his lingering anger and confusion, replacing it with a tidal wave of guilt and a profound, aching empathy. He hadn't remembered her. He hadn't remembered the conversation about the stars, a fleeting moment that had clearly meant something to her. He hadn't remembered the encounter that had resulted in a child. His careless, drunken night, forgotten by morning, had irrevocably altered her life, plunging her into hardship, fear, and desperate choices while he remained oblivious in his world of privilege. He saw her not as some irresponsible woman who had abandoned her child, but as a young, scared mother backed into a corner, making an agonizing decision she believed was selfless. She had tried to protect him, protect his image, and most of all, protect their daughter from the poverty she couldn't escape. The unfairness of it all, the stark contrast between his life and hers, fueled by his own actions, struck him with brutal force. He thought of Lily, safe in his mansion with a nanny, warm, fed, wanting for nothing materially. Then he looked at Mia, thin, exhausted, weeping on a threadbare sofa in a bleak apartment, having carried Lily for 9 months, given birth alone, and then endured the trauma of giving her up. The disconnect was staggering. The injustice, unbearable. He moved towards the sofa and knelt on the floor in front of her, mirroring, in a way, her posture at James's grave in the earlier story prompted an unconscious gesture of humility and supplication. Mia, he said, his voice thick with emotion he could no longer contain. Tears welled in his own eyes, blurring her image. Mia, I am so sorry. The words felt inadequate, ridiculously small compared to the weight of his culpability, his ignorance, her suffering. I'm sorry I don't remember, he continued, his voice breaking. I'm sorry for that night, for being so careless, so reckless. I'm sorry for everything you've been through because of me, for the fear, the struggle, the pain. for having to make such an impossible choice. You shouldn't have had to go through any of it alone. He reached out tentatively, not to touch her, but as a plea. You were trying to protect her, and maybe me, but you've carried this burden alone for too long. He thought again of Lily, his daughter. His heart ached with a confusing mix of newfound love and profound regret. He looked at Mia, seeing not just the mother of his child, but a young woman whose life he had inadvertently broken. The tears spilled over, tracking paths down his face, mirroring hers. He wasn't just crying for himself, or even for Lily, but for Mia, for the lonely, terrifying journey she had endured because of him. Lucas remained kneeling for a moment, letting the weight of his apology, his remorse, settle in the small, quiet room. Mia slowly lifted her head, looking at him through tear-filled eyes, surprise warring with her ingrained weariness and suspicion. She had probably expected anger, accusations, legal threats, not this raw display of guilt and empathy from the famous man whose life seemed worlds away. I don't blame you," Mia whispered, though her voice trembled. "Not entirely. It was my mistake too." "It doesn't matter whose mistake it was, Mia," Lucas said firmly, meeting her gaze. "What matters is Lily, our daughter, and what matters is what happens now." He took a deep breath, the next words feeling momentous, life-altering. "I want to be your father, Mia. Not just financially, not from a distance. I want to be present. I want to raise her." He paused, then added the crucial part. "And I want you to be her mother. With her. Every day." Mia stared at him, confusion clouding her features. What are you saying?" "I'm saying, come live with me," Lucas said, the offer feeling both insane and utterly right. "You and Lily, come back to Malibu. I have more room than anyone could possibly need. You'll have your own space, privacy, whatever you need. But Lily needs her mother. And maybe we can figure out how to be a family. For her." He saw the shock bloom on Mia's face, followed swiftly by disbelief. "Live with you? In your mansion? Lucas, that's crazy. We're strangers. And look at me. Look at this place. I don't belong in your world. Lily belongs with her mother," Lucas insisted gently but firmly. "And you belong with her. Your circumstances now, they're partly my fault. Let me help fix this. Not with payoffs, Mia, but with support. A home, security, a chance for you to get back on your feet, to be the mother you clearly want to be without the constant struggle." He saw the internal conflict raging in her eyes, the fear of accepting, of entering his dazzling, intimidating world, of trusting him, but also the undeniable pull of being with her child, the relief from the crushing weight of poverty and desperation. "I don't know," she whispered, looking away, overwhelmed. "Think about Lily," Lucas urged softly. "She deserves to have both her parents, if we can make it work. She deserves to know her mother's love firsthand, not just her sacrifice. Please, Mia, give us a chance. Give her a chance." He waited, holding his breath. He had laid everything on the line: his guilt, his plea, his offer. It was a fragile bridge built across the chasm between their lives. Mia looked down at her hands, then back up at Lucas, her gaze searching his face for sincerity, for assurance. Finally, after a long, tense silence, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Tears streamed down her face again, but this time they seemed tinged with a fragile glimmer of hope. "Okay," she whispered, the word barely audible, but carrying the weight of a surrendered burden and a terrifying leap of faith. "Okay, Lucas." For Lily. Relief washed over Lucas so intensely it left him weak. He slowly rose to his feet. "Okay," he echoed, managing a shaky smile. Okay, let's go home. The journey back to Malibu was surreal for both Lucas and Mia. Lucas arranged for a discreet car service, helping Mia pack the few belongings she possessed into a couple of worn bags. Leaving the bleak apartment complex felt like shedding a heavy skin for Mia, yet stepping into Lucas's world felt like entering an alien landscape. When they arrived back at the mansion, Lily was awake, being calmly rocked by the nanny, Amelia. Seeing Mia, Lucas gently took the baby. "Lily," he said softly, turning to Mia, "this is your mommy. She's come home." He carefully placed Lily into Mia's arms. Mia cradled her daughter close, burying her face in the baby's soft hair, tears of relief and overwhelming love flowing freely. It was a reunion fraught with complex emotions, but undeniably powerful. Lily, sensing her mother's presence, settled instantly, snuggling against her. Eleanor's immediate acceptance in the previous story wasn't feasible here. Lucas was single, navigating this alone initially. He introduced Mia to Amelia and Clara, explaining simply that Mia was Lily's mother and would be living there. Both experienced staff members, accustomed to the eccentricities of Lucas's life, reacted with professional discretion, though Clara offered Mia a particularly warm, welcoming smile. Lucas showed Mia to a beautiful guest wing, far more spacious and luxurious than her entire previous apartment. It offered privacy, with its own bedroom, bathroom, sitting area, and balcony overlooking the ocean. "Make this your own," he told her. "Whatever you need, just ask Maria or tell me." The initial days and weeks were a period of delicate adjustment. Mia was understandably overwhelmed by the opulence, the staff, and the sheer presence of Lucas Grant, the superstar, in her daily life. She was quiet, hesitant, often retreating to her rooms with Lily. Lucas tried to give her space while also making overtures, initiating conversations, asking her opinion on things for Lily, trying to bridge the gap between them. He threw himself into fatherhood with surprising dedication. He learned Lily's cues, mastered diaper changes, insisted on taking night feedings alongside Mia or Amelia so Mia could rest. He discovered the simple joy of Lily's first smile, the warmth of her sleeping on his chest. This tiny person was grounding him, giving his often chaotic life a new, vital center. He also made sure Mia had everything she needed: comfortable clothes, nutritious food, access to doctors for her own postpartum recovery. He encouraged her to rest, to focus on bonding with Lily, assuring her she didn't need to worry about finances or finding work immediately. There were awkward moments navigating shared spaces, misunderstandings born from their vastly different backgrounds, the unspoken questions about their own relationship. They were not a couple, not romantically involved, bound only by their shared child and the strange circumstances that had brought them together. They were essentially strangers learning to co-parent under one roof. Lucas also had to manage the external world. He instructed David Chun and his PR team to prepare for eventual questions, deciding on a strategy of quiet confirmation rather than splashy announcements. His focus was on protecting Lily and Mia from the inevitable media storm as much as possible. Slowly, Mia began to relax. She spent hours with Lily, her maternal instincts flourishing now that the crushing weight of survival had been lifted. She started exploring the mansion's library, rediscovering her love for books. She sketched in a notebook Lucas had bought her, revealing a quiet artistic talent. She began having longer conversations with Lucas, sharing tentative thoughts, asking questions about his life, his music. They were finding a cautious rhythm, two people from different universes learning to orbit the same small sun, Lily. Living together under one roof, bound by a child but not by romantic love, presented inevitable challenges. The stark differences in their backgrounds and lifestyles created friction points. Mia sometimes felt like an intruder in Lucas's glamorous world, uncomfortable with the casual display of wealth and the presence of household staff. Lucas, accustomed to his independence and privacy, occasionally chafed at the constant presence of Mia and the demands of a baby, though he quickly suppressed these feelings with guilt. Communication was key, but often difficult. Mia was hesitant to voice her needs or opinions, afraid of seeming ungrateful or demanding. Lucas, used to people anticipating his every desire, wasn't always perceptive about Mia's unspoken feelings. They had misunderstandings about parenting decisions, schedules, and household dynamics. Amelia, the nanny, often found herself acting as a gentle mediator. As predicted, news eventually leaked. A tabloid photographer caught a glimpse of Mia holding Lily on the mansion's secluded terrace. Speculation exploded. Luke Grant's mystery woman and secret baby. Lucas, following David Chen's advice, issued a brief, calm statement confirming he had recently discovered he was a father and was committed to providing a loving, private upbringing for his daughter, requesting respect for their privacy. He made no comment on his relationship with Mia beyond acknowledging her as Lily's mother. The media attention was intense for a while, putting immense strain on Mia, who wasn't used to any kind of scrutiny. Paparazzi occasionally camped outside the gates. Lucas increased security and did his best to shield Mia and Lily, limiting his public appearances for a time. This shared experience, weathering the storm together, unexpectedly brought them closer. Mia saw Lucas use his power and influence not just for himself, but to protect them, and she began to trust him more. Lucas saw Mia's quiet strength and dignity under pressure, admiring her resilience. Lucas also had to navigate reactions from his own circle. His manager, Alex, was initially concerned about the impact on his image and career, but seeing Lucas's commitment to Lily, he shifted focus to managing the narrative positively. Some friends were supportive, others skeptical or gossipy. Lucas found himself reevaluating some relationships, drawing closer to those who offered genuine support. Mia, with Lucas's encouragement, started taking online courses in graphic design, nurturing her artistic talent. Having financial security allowed her the mental space to think about her own future beyond mere survival. Lucas helped her set up a small studio space in a spare room. This focus on her own growth helped build her confidence and independence within the strange new structure of their lives. They learned to co-parent more effectively, attending parenting classes together, discussing discipline, routines, and milestones. They discovered they could laugh together, share anxieties about Lily's first cold, and find common ground in their overwhelming love for their daughter. The romantic element remained absent, replaced by a growing respect, understanding, and a unique, supportive partnership forged in unlikely circumstances. They weren't falling in love in a traditional sense, but they were certainly building the love of a family. 18 months after that fateful morning, the Malibu mansion felt irrevocably changed. The cool, minimalist spaces were now softened by the joyful chaos of a toddler. Lily, a bright, curious little girl with Lucas's dark hair and Mia's blue eyes, was walking, talking, and filling the house with laughter. Toys were scattered artfully across expensive rugs. Child safety gates were discreetly installed, and the pristine white sofas occasionally bore the faint evidence of tiny, sticky fingers. Lucas was a different man. Fatherhood had grounded him in a way fame never could. He was more selective about his tours and projects, prioritizing time at home. His music had taken on a new depth, a raw emotional honesty that resonated with critics and fans alike. He found immense joy in the simple things, teaching Lily chords on a small guitar, reading her bedtime stories, watching her chase butterflies in the garden. The loneliness that had once haunted the corners of his life had largely evaporated, replaced by the fulfilling exhaustion of parenthood. Mia had blossomed. With her graphic design skills flourishing, she had started a successful freelance business, working from her home studio. She carried herself with a newfound confidence, no longer the timid, overwhelmed young woman Lucas had found in Pasadena. She was a capable, loving mother and a respected partner in raising their daughter. While grateful for Lucas's support, she valued her growing independence. She had friends, pursued her interests, and navigated Lucas's world with grace, never losing her own identity. Their relationship remained unconventional. They were devoted co-parents, trusted friends, and partners in creating a stable, loving home for Lily. There were still challenges, moments of friction, and the occasional curious glance from outsiders, but they had built a solid foundation of mutual respect and deep affection, centered around their shared love for their daughter. Romance wasn't the focus, but a deep, familial bond had undeniably formed. One sunny afternoon, Lucas sat on the lawn watching Mia push Lily on a swing set he'd had installed. Lily shrieked with delight, her laughter echoing in the sea air. Mia glanced over at Lucas, her eyes meeting his, and smiled a genuine, unguarded smile that reached her eyes. In that simple moment, Lucas felt a profound sense of peace and rightness. His life hadn't turned out the way he'd ever imagined. It was messy, more complicated, but infinitely richer. The three of them, brought together by a reckless night and a desperate act, had navigated the wreckage and built something new, something strong, something undeniably happy. The Golden Cage had become a warm, vibrant home, filled not with emptiness, but with the enduring, redemptive power of family. They weren't broken anymore. They were healing together.